Well, thank you very much for sticking it out the entire day. I hope everybody really got something out of the conference. I think personally it's been a really good conference. I want to thank Laureen for everything she's done to make sure this thing flowed really well. She's replacing Kim, who I found out was on vacation in Italy. So I had to ask Kim, why am I here giving a talk and not in Italy giving a talk?
That part.
Haven't heard that back yet, so I don't know what that's going on. I want to also thank Michael and his tech crew. They've done an excellent job in getting everything going, and I think it's just gone really, really smooth and really, really well. So before I get started, I got one little quick story I want to tell you that reminds me of when we do these panels, and this is the first time I've actually moderated one of these. I'm usually on the other side, so I'm going to have fun doing this one. There's a story about a young man that was sitting in a room with an older gentleman they were both in the same field. The older gentleman obviously has got a lot of experience, and the young man stepped up to him and he wanted to learn a little bit. And he said, I would really like to know what your secret to success is. And the old gentleman said, good decisions. And then he said, how do you get to a place to make good decisions? And the old gentleman said, experience. So the final question that the young man had was, well, how do you get experience? And the old man said, bad decisions. And we can all attest to that, right? We all make these decisions continuously. So that, and I think if you can compare what bad decisions are to gray hairs, you can really see what I've gone through. So I want the panelists to introduce themselves, and I'm going to start at this end because if I start at that end, he's going to take up the entire hour. So I'll let you start.
So my name is Ron Bevans. I am the VP of Technology and Data Protection Officer for BenefitHub. I'm kind of that rainbow unicorn. I do both IT and security at the same time. So kind of walk that fine line, making sure that both sides get done.
Thanks. Anil Varghese. I'm a Senior Operating Advisor with Francisco Partners, 5-time CISO. Next year will be 30 years in security space. So seen a little bit of everything globally. Got a chance to work on some interesting gigs, but more importantly, help companies manage their risk.
Candace Williams. I'm an associate director at a small defense contractor, Raytheon, which is now RTX. I am under the Global Security Services collateral domain, and I support programs in the central region. I've been doing cyber for about 20 years, and I'm here.
Hi, everyone. Larry Whiteside, Jr. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for RegScale. I've been in this industry for 30 years. I've been a CISO of more companies than I can count. And I do this running my mouth a lot. So if you don't know me, I'm very opinionated because I've experienced a lot of things in every possible scenario in every vertical you can imagine.
All right, very good. And the way we're going to do this is I'm going to have a few questions for discussion, and then we're going to open up some questions from the audience. That should be really interesting. I don't think I've ever attended a CISO panel where they opened up the bar before they asked questions. So you guys, you need to be looking out for questions that are getting ready to come your way. It's either that or you could look at it as a positive that whatever answer you give may be slight tilted in how much they've had to drink out there. So. Okay, so I'm going to start this off with, and I don't care who wants to take the first question, but I'm going to start off with what's the biggest threats in your environment or your customer base, and what are people most concerned about given the recent major vulnerabilities?
So it's kind of a two-edged sword. Without a doubt, end users would be the biggest threat, but I would have to say that if you don't have a really good security training program on how to train the users not to do what they do, you might be their biggest threat. So I mean, you have inside trade, you have a ton of other stuff, but it's our job in security to train those that aren't in security how to do things securely. And that's really why we have a job, is not just keep things secure, but you got to keep the people secure, and the only way you can do that is through training.
All right. So I'm a bit of a curmudgeon. Here's the reality. Vulnerabilities aren't new. I don't care 0-day, 100-day, like vulnerabilities aren't new. I don't care about vulnerabilities, right? People aren't new. Carbon-based life forms are always going to do dumb shit, like just period. It's the nature of who we are. If you've got kids, they come out the womb starting doing dumb shit, right? So that's who we are. For me, it's visibility is everything. We as an industry still do not see everything that we have. And assets are constantly being redefined. That's my biggest issue, is the new definition of asset and ensuring that I have visibility on every single one of them across my internal, external, end-user base, everything that we theoretically own.
Anybody else want to try that one? No? All right. So we'll move on to the next one then. What's the biggest shift in security approaches within your customer base, and what are organizations prioritizing when it comes to addressing new tools and new technologies?
It's your turn.
The one I'm sorry, Candace, but we had a pre before this one, and this was one question I told her I was not going to be asking. So Candace is going to get a bypass on this one.
I told you I have opinions. My tool, I'm a technology company. We are a modern GRC tool, right? So for us, regulation is everything, right? Every company today is dealing with some form of regulatory pain. If you, from PCI, go forward, right? The new SEC rules around reporting, like there's a bunch of shit that everybody's dealing with now that they can't deal with. And auditors don't care. They're coming in, they're telling you, and every one of these technology companies in here has customers that are coming in auditing them, right, on how they're doing their business, how they're maintaining their data. So everybody's dealing with something. How many of these tech companies are trying to do FedRAMP? Raise your hand, right? Don't be shy. Listen, I know you are. Everybody wants to get into the federal government. Like, there are so many different regulations that are driving and basically grabbing a hold of companies. That's one of the big things, and it takes a lot of time. If anybody's gone down the FedRAMP path, that's a 2-year process. She's dealing with CMMC and her customer base. That is a freaking shithole, right? Like, so there's a lot of regulations and things that everybody's starting to deal with, but it's still the most manual process of things that we deal with in our industry holistically. That is the one area that we have not innovated in. We have continued to just push paper and push Excel sheets. So for me, in my customer base, that's the biggest challenge that they're dealing with.
Great.
So I would say my biggest challenge that I see is budget. That it's very hard to find the approval to get the money to do what you need to do. So what I've seen the huge shift in is automated tools that allow you to replace the human asset. Especially this year where everything is tight, it's really hard to say I need to go get an engineer. But I can say I can get this solution for $20,000 to try and cover some of the stuff that engineer would do. And so it's really out of necessity trying to get those tools to help you offset not being able to have the actual human resource that you really need for the job.
Okay, Candace, I got a good question for you. What's the best way for security professionals to take that communications back to security teams and to your executive levels or boards when you have to identify a security threat?
What's the best way?
What's the best way?
Directly, right? Being direct, being clear on what the issue is and tying it to something that makes sense to them, right? So if you're using, we talked about earlier, technical jargon to explain something or to present something to your board or to your leadership team, they're not going to get it, right? So you have to make sure it translates appropriately to them so that they can understand what the problem is and how it impacts the business, right? Because at the end of the day, the bottom line is why we're here to make money. Businesses are here to actually, get the money. So you want to make sure you translate that risk or translate whatever it is appropriately to your board, your CISOs, your leadership team, what have you. So directly and translate it properly. Yeah.
Anil?
Yeah, I'd add, I mentor CISOs as well and engage with boards. Look, you got to be able to speak the language of the board, the language of business. We talked about before, Candace highlighted it, is drop the take on babble, the lingo at the door, ensure you're walking in, understand what your business, those leaders are doing, what their spaces are. If you're talking to the CFO, you better make sure you know where your company is, your revenue targets are, what markets you're about to move into, and why you're going to enable them, right? We've talked about security leaders trying to have a seat at the table. You got to ensure you keep that seat. Be a risk manager, risk advisor, engage them where they sit. So what I advise our folks is learn the business, understand where you are. If you're looking to move to new markets, know that space, know the risks you're about to take on, and be able to bring that to the table.
We're going to continue on that journey of communications because that's typically one of our largest challenges when we're trying to communicate. So does technology play any role in your communications back to your leadership? Such as, let's bring it up, such as AI and ChatGPT, is that playing any role in how you communicate back to the executive leaders?
I'm not using that. All my communication is based on relationships. For those who know me, right, you guys know me well, I'm a relationship guy. So even with my executive team of every company I've ever been a part of, I create relationships with every leader across the company. Both my ELT that I'm reporting into, my director and his or her peers, but as well as my peers across the business. So for me, every aspect of communication is based on having built a strong foundational relationship with those individuals so that not only am I able to communicate in the language they understand, they are then communicating with me because they know I care and that I'm there to try and help them be more successful.
Okay, all right. Anybody else want that?
Yeah, so I'll add, I'm not using AI in that capacity in the same vein, right? But that being said, you've got to be able to come to the table and have done your homework too, because they're going to ask your opinion as the technology lead, the security lead. Not only how can we leverage this, what are the ramifications of it from a security, risk, privacy vantage point? So I would say the biggest thing is, again, Larry touched upon it, an established relationship, and know that you're going to be the go-to person that's going to be able to speak to these areas and talk to what are the confines that we got to work within, what are the parameters that we got to talk to. I talked to an executive a couple weeks ago overseas and say, oh, this is like open source. Like, no, it's not like open source. When the Today Show and the ABC, they're talking about doing a segment on AI, it's just everybody and their mama using this, right? So you've got to at least understand what it is, what it's capable of, even though it's changing, and say that, hey, maybe our position will change next month or next quarter, but you can rely on me to bring that to you.
Very good. So going back on budgets, you mentioned one of your largest challenges is budgeting and resource. How can the importance of security and compliance budgets be conveyed to stakeholders during an economic downturn?
So I kind of touched on it before of not having the resources to be able to fulfill. I'm sure I'm not the only one that I had a budget approved for 2023 and actually got pulled out from underneath me in April of 2023. So at the end of the day, you have to talk business. You can't talk tech. You have to convey to them the true cost to the company of not implementing what they've denied. And so, if you come back to them and you say, I need $20,000, they're going to say no, because we don't have $20,000. But you can say, for this $20,000, I can implement this, this, and this that could prevent us from losing $1 million in the event of a breach. But these aren't numbers that you just pull out of air. You have to do the research. You have to know what it would truly cost your company to be down for 2 hours, 1 day, 3 weeks. You know, like they said, at a ransomware and you don't have anything in place, it's not the next day. So you really need to know those numbers of what it truly would cost the company to be down, to say, I can have this backup solution that would keep everything offsite so that we can't hit by ransomware, and it's going to cost us $10,000, but this would guarantee that I can have the company back up within 4 hours rather than 4+ weeks. And you really have to put it into what those terms that the business understands in order to sell the technology that the business truly needs.
I was just going to say prioritizing, right? So you don't have all the money in the world. It's not a blank checkbook. So you got to prioritize what's most important during that time. So if you know that, then you can allocate resources appropriately, right? You still can't do everything in general, right? So with less funding, with less money, it's even more important to prioritize and make it clear on what's important to the business and align. So.
Yeah, so I love that, because I will clearly say that means I can't do these 5 things. Y'all good with that? Okay, then we fine. Now, but what I'll add to what you said was, I use analogies, right? So for me, analogies paint pictures for people. So I use this analogy a lot because it resonates to everybody. But the first board that I got in front of in 2005 to present my budget and my plan, right? They didn't understand why I was asking for $25 million. They didn't get it. They're like, wait, what? Huh? And so I said this. I said, so raise your hand, and I want to do this exercise here. Raise your hand if you have health insurance. Come on, everybody in here has health insurance. Stop playing with me. All right, raise your hand if you have car insurance. Raise your hand if you have life insurance. Anybody planning on dying tomorrow? Anybody plan on getting sick tomorrow? Anybody plan on leaving here and getting into a car accident? No, but we still pay for it, right? And for them it all resonates. You pay for it because it's cheaper to pay for it now than it is to pay for it after the incident happens. That is cybersecurity, right? So when they heard that, that then made sense. So then I was able to go into, with that money, here's the risk that I'm going to mitigate. Here's the money I'm going to save the organization in the event of these types of things happening. That directly correlated to what they understood and their bottom line, and that $25 million was a drop in the bucket compared to what the potential cost of loss was going to be for the business. They got it. So I use analogies a ton. I did a podcast yesterday with Sands, and it was all about analogies. It's funny.
Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna. I don't get it very often to add on what Larry says, but I've got one. And this is important for those that are in this position where you're trying to quantify what a potential incident might happen to your company. And you may know this, but you may not, because I've run into a lot of people that don't. But if you're trying to actually quantify in dollar terms what the impact is to your company, one person to go to, and that's your CFO or the person, your comptroller, whoever's in that company. I can guarantee you they know exactly how much per day that the business brings in. And you get that $1 figure. Now you as the cyber professional know the numbers by going out to industry and knowing that an incident can take this long to recoup. And then you use their number back on them and say, okay, I got 10 days at your figure. This is what it's going to cost us just in business loss. Not anything to do with how much it's going to recover. When you get to that point, and especially with boards and executive leaders, that resonates really fast. So that's the fastest way sometimes to get that risk to get it in the forefront. So let's go, before I get into the audience, to start thinking about your questions. Agree or disagree? It's impossible to stop all cyber attacks, so organizations should focus more on resources on recovering from cyber incidents. Why or why not? And if you agree with that statement, what would the focus on recovery look like? If you don't agree with it, why do you think organizations should not focus on recovery only?
So I would definitely say not recovery only. I'd say I'm probably 50-50, right? So you have to prevent. Preventative measures are still important, even though we know breaches happen, incidents happen. I mean, it's never 100% or foolproof, but it's also about preventing the things from happening and making sure once it happens, you have an incident response plan or a recovery plan to respond to it. So I think it's a little bit of both. It's not one over the other. It's not recovery only. So it's a little bit of everything.
Incident response plan that you've practiced. You have to exercise it. Listen, let me ask this question. Does anybody in here think that you're ever going to be fit with zero exercise? No. Well, I saw somebody raise their hand. That's nonsense. We know the answer to that. Oh, gosh. Of course it was you. We know the answer to that. But for some reason, in organizations, we feel that we are going to be good running a program without ever testing, without ever exercising it. It's not reality. I've been into organizations as a CISO, walked in, and it was 4 CEOs later that was still listed in the friggin' incident response plan. How is that possible? Like, seriously, people. So exercise your incident response plan. I'm with her that it's a balance. You can't be too heavy one side or the other, but you've got to test your incident response plan. You've got to have a plan that is kept up to date, and that testing has got to be operational testing with the people and processes that are actually going to recover the systems, but also the executives. I've been in an organization where the executives had never done a walkthrough, and we had an incident, and they had no idea what their roles are. The attorney had no idea that they needed to have outside counsel to deal with. The communications, there was none of that stuff was in place, right? So it's everybody's got to know, everybody's got to understand their roles from the CEO down to the lowest level of the technician.
So if everybody heard my address earlier, I call that the fundamentals, right? That is a fundamental thing you need to be doing. And I'm going to throw one more on top of that incident response plan, but that's also your data backups. How many organizations, this is rhetorical, how many organizations actually test data backups? Have actually pulled them back in and recovered from a data backup?
One step above that, how many people here have immutable backups? Because a backup is only as good as it is to restore, and if a hacker finds it, you don't have it. So you have to have not just backups, immutable backups, something that cannot be altered in any way, shape, or form. And that's the only way you can truly realize that you have something to recover from. And then, also cyber insurance. If you don't have cyber insurance, you're insane. Because otherwise, you're going to foot the full bill when it eventually happens that you have that incident. You have to have that cyber insurance. You have.
Well, so I've had organizations who said they'll self-fund up to $100 million, and because when they looked at the cost of cyber insurance for $100 million in coverage, they said they'd rather pay that out of their own coffers than actually pay, right? So some organizations, depending on the size, will self-fund.
Absolutely.
All these other things still have to happen.
Get in writing.
Right.
Because they're going to come back to you, especially as a CISO, they're going to come back to you and say it's your fault. We don't have insurance, it's your fault. So if they truly decide that, get it in writing. Get everything in writing. Get it in triplicate if you can. Oh man, we don't need.
Are you saying I talk a lot?
You should not have given him his own microphone.
It's got my initials on it. Wow.
All right, so now it's, let's move to the audience. Is there any questions out there we can, got one all the way in the, oh, wait a minute. Hold on a minute, Linton.
Oh, you lost it.
I got one here in the front. Okay, all right. He's getting the microphone first, Jeremy, so we'll let him do his first.
Uh-oh, y'all in trouble now. One of the things that I'm seeing a lot of is API. If you're a software developer, or they're trying to use API and hook into everything, and I feel like that's kind of the wild, wild west where you have all these great tools saying we can protect you, we can monitor it, but then when you kind of pull back the onion, you're not really seeing much of that. So what do you guys think about API? Because I just feel like between phishing attempts and APIs, those will be the two, and end users. Those are going to be one of the vectors that's going to hit you based off historical facts. So what do you guys think about that?
So APIs are here to stay, right? They are basically a cloud integrated component of what we're going to live with. So the reality is they are now an asset. So when you think of right? You think of an endpoint, right? So we've all heard of endpoints. We think about desktops and laptops as assets, and then we move to identity as an asset. So we've got usernames, right? And then also the PC accounts are assets. And API is now an asset. When I was talking about assets earlier and visibility into all the assets that you have as an organization, an API is an asset. And until organizations recognize that APIs are asset, we're going to continue to be screwed in that world because they are a blind spot for the majority of companies. I can't name a very public company that just went through and found they had 300,000 APIs they didn't know about. So it's a real thing. They're here to stay, so get used to it. No name salt. There's a whole bunch of API companies, security companies out there, but get visibility to them first. Don't focus on security if you can't see them, because if you can't see them, then it doesn't matter. So make sure you can see them, and once you see them, categorize them based on the data that's flowing through them, because that's the next big risk, and then do something.
Anybody else?
Can't add to that.
Okay, Jeremy.
Dave said, feel free to throw your curveball. So, is post-quantum on your roadmap, and what are you doing about it?
Ooh.
Anil, I haven't heard from you lately.
As a research item, post-quantum is there, right? So we're looking at it, and I actually spoke about it at a conference in London a couple weeks ago. So, like a lot of, what's that? So, yeah, so quantum and post-quantum, right? So it's the theory behind that, of course, is being able to leverage quantum technologies to break technology, specifically encryption, right? So there are a lot of nation states, China, Russia, US, others that are developing, have been investing time, energy, resources into the technology space, but also what can they do with it, right? The premise behind that is the old crypto standards like DES is going to fall to the wayside. Unless you're leveraging a high-length bit key, whether it's AES or something that's FIPS2, you've got to have that quantified. But beyond that, it's looking at, hey, how is this application going to impact us, right? You've got to know your risk profile. If you're in a financial services space, you're already doing the research and development in that space. If you're JP Morgan, if you're Chase, if you're B of A, you're already investing, looking at technologies and how are we going to proof that? How are we going to prevent or minimize the impact or even tokenize some of that technology?
So quantum is this, it's about speed, right? So if we think about cryptography over the decades, right, 256 was the thing, and then 512, and then 1024, right? So quantum is about having enough compute speed to move fast enough to break algorithms. Cryptography is just an algorithm. So what's happening is you now have these what we call post-quantum algorithms, and NIST just released, I think, 3 or 4 as the standard that they're going to adopt. Quantum is here, right? So we are already starting the post-quantum age. We have to prepare for it. We have to start thinking about what technologies are we going to utilize that are going to be able to take advantage of it and utilize it to the best of our ability. And how do we protect against it? Because to his point, nation states are rapidly going there, right? With the advent of the cloud, you can spin up so much compute speed, like it is insane. And then when you start talking about blockchain and what people are doing to build out those blockchains, it just exacerbates the problem. So post-quantum is here. We're living in it now. There's just not enough of it for us to take advantage. But there's a lot of things happening in that space. I'm on the board of a post-quantum encryption company, and it's rather interesting. It's beyond my mindset and what I can actually do from a technical standpoint, but just the theory of it, I get, and it's kind of scary.
Anyone else?
I just had one additional comment. You know, years ago it used to be like, well, we're using AES or we're using 256, and people say, no, this 40-bit will last forever. The thing is, back in the day, back in the Moore's law, right? You had a chip speed, you had your PC, so maybe I could daisy chain these, and it was going to take me 4 years to crack this. Now, again, the impetus for quantum is not going to close that window down to hours or minutes or seconds, right? That's the impetus for why people are looking at it from a technology perspective of how do we combat this.
Okay, this is why I'm glad I'm not on the panel, because I don't have to answer this question. I think we're all doomed. That's really where I think we are. Anybody else? Another question? Got one right here.
always interested in lessons learned. So anything that you had tried to do with an exercise, and if there was a real event, ended up being different.
So, as we said, you learn from your mistakes. My first time I got in front of a board members, I started talking about DNS and IPs and TLS, and one of the board members stood up and said, okay, I've got a TLA for you, and I was like, what do you mean by TLA? He goes, well, 3-letter acronyms. You've been throwing them around. We don't understand it, so I thought I'd throw one back at you. And it's kind of that same thing of that's what really opened my eyes of I'm talking tech, I'm not talking business. And so it's that, entire board laughing at you, but take that away as a learning opportunity. And we build our careers off of all those learning opportunities that we have.
Yeah, I'd say that's part of the journey, right? There's good decisions, bad decisions. Sometimes bad decisions are fun, but pay for it later. But in the security realm, I think part of that is knowing the space that you're in, right? I think a big part of this is culture, right? I think Dave talked about before is, when you have executive sign-off and management guiding you, that's one thing. But if you walk into an environment where you're not getting that support and you try to push that large boulder up that hill, it's going to be a Herculean matter. I had experience at my first management gig, but my leadership changed, and they were all into security, and I started spending more time globally overseas because of that. But it's, again, knowing the pulse of your organization and going back to security as a whole. It's culture, too, right? You've got to be an advocate, getting the message out, getting the word out, engaging your peers across the aisle outside of tech. Walk into HR, walk into accounting, finance, knowing their hotspots, knowing the issues they're facing.
Yeah, I was just going to add, so in the defense space, we really look at compliance, right? It's a huge thing. So whenever we have inspections, whenever we have some sort of third party coming in to review our systems, the biggest thing is the lessons are when we actually get inspected, when we have something that we get dinged on and it's wrong, and then being able to come back and say, okay, here's our AAR, here's what we did wrong, here's how we fix it. And then moving forward, when you prepare for an inspection or whatever it is, you have that list of things you've done wrong and things to look for, right? So it's the best practices we put together from actually getting hit on something or dinged on something, not an exercise. I wish, though, but no, sometimes it's just you experience it, you fail, have an issue, and then track it, fix it, make sure you keep an eye on it for next time.
So for me, I'm going to dive into a little bit of a different piece. So for me, it was learning the importance of leadership in the organization you choose to go work for. I've advised, I've been on the board of a number of different technology companies. I've been the CISO of a bunch of different companies. And I always thought that, I could go in as a security leader and my impact was going to be enough to carry whatever needed to happen. But, I went to this one organization and I was the CISO of one of the big, it was a portfolio company. So there were 4 companies under one umbrella company. And I was the CISO of one, and we were the biggest company. So I thought, okay, I could carry this. But then we got hit with a huge lawsuit at the umbrella company. The umbrella company decided to shrink what we call the support structures across the 4 into 1. And then, of course, I thought, okay, well, of course, I'm going to get that new gig as the CISO of the umbrella company because I had 80% of the employees across the thing. And it didn't happen. So I was like, all right, fine. Well, I'm me. I know what I'm doing. I'm great at what I do. And they got a new leader in. And when they brought this new leader in, he and I didn't see eye to eye. We literally were banging heads on a regular basis. And I started to realize that my integrity, I had, for the first time in my career, had to choose my integrity over the job. Because I had always thought that the job, because of my role, my integrity was just never going to be questioned. I was never going to be put in a position where the company or leadership was going to ask me to do something that didn't align. Because we're in security. Of course, they're going to always ask me to do things that align with what my role is. So for me, it is, throughout my career, I'm choosing my integrity first. But always, before I take a role, I'm looking at the leadership of the company and understanding their backgrounds and who they are before I decide to go work for somebody.
Okay, next question.
So, when COVID hit and everyone went remote, how did you as security executives respond to the business leaders wanting to continue business and really focusing on, how business operations will continue and how to keep their customers happy and do as the least possible damage as possible? How did you say that we still have to think about security, especially people going remote, and now there's an increase in shadow IT, and you have to change around your incident response plans and all those considerations. How did you go about that?
I did take your mic, didn't I? I'm sorry. Where did the other one go?
I'll get my words in real quick. So we were fortunate enough that we had the ability to work remote. It just wasn't full time. So we already had VPN set up. We had to greatly enhance what we had for VPN because we didn't have it to support everybody. But we don't have shadow IT because we don't have local admin rights. So everybody has to come to IT still. They still have to connect to VPN to do the job. So we still can manage what they can do based on how the rails we already had set up before that. And that's really what it is you get the rails set up so that something like this doesn't stop the business. It just redirects how the business works.
Yeah, I would add, I was in a regulated industry at the time, financial services, and, we were global in nature, so overnight you had people, call centers that had to go home and work from home, right? So we had to create this solution for having folks work from home, get new licenses, get new VPN. That's pivoting, right? But we had a crash team that we called, that we engaged collectively, representation from security operations, and we were there the whole weekend. We were handing out keyboards, we were getting licenses set up, and then we had sister companies within our firm do the same thing globally, right? Our sister entities, and they were going back and say, hey, what do you need? What do we have visibility to? Ensure that we have a plan. And if it's not part of a BCP DR, we're adding pages, right? So it's about being nimble and agile, and we're used to that from security folks. The threat landscape changes not only daily, but hourly, right? So for us, it was more a firefight, but now we had to bring more people into the fold. And the other thing we did is we extended security down to the home front, providing security at the home, their home routers to that extent.
So I would just say we had to pivot for sure, but the work that's done within the defense space, you're on site. You have to be on site. You can't work remote with the type of work that we do. So you had to show up. There were distance requirements and all that, but you had to show up for work. So we made provisions and made sure people were safe, of course, but there was no work remote, not come in. That didn't quite happen. So.
Hence why I'm not in the Fed anymore. But to further Anil's point, right, it was really about VDI and a number of things that we were already using, right? We already had a lot of the technologies in place. We just had to expand the licensing, right? We had burst licensing for VPNs. We already had VDI machines. We just had to order more, right? And we had some in warehouses. So it was about figuring out that whole supply chain piece of how do we get things to people now to get them to their home. And that was the biggest challenge. But outside of that, it was really more of a hiccup than anything else.
Okay, and while we're waiting for the next question to come out, I want to remind the people online, you can ask questions virtually, so we're watching for those questions if anybody is watching online.
Yeah, I was curious, what was your most recent, really bad day at work, and what was so frustrating about it? And conversely, what was a really good day? What would that be for you recently, and what was so rewarding about it?
So, I have the mics, I guess. So Raytheon is now RTX, right? So we went through a recent merge between two of the larger businesses, RINS, Raytheon Intelligence and Space, and Raytheon Missiles and Defense. So I think for me, the most challenging part is that, right? You're bringing together two entities, you're restructuring things, you're kind of trying to consolidate standards, you're just adjusting and pivoting. So for me, that's probably been the most challenging, right? Still managing and leading a team while we're all experiencing these changes and trying to make sure we work together to still service our customers, still meet these requirements. So that's probably been some of the worst, more challenging days, not worse, but just challenging. And the best is just when things move, when meetings happen, people are, collaborating, we're working together. I mean, those are the best days when you can always work with your team and add value for me. So that's it.
So for me, the worst is really so I report to the CEO, and for me, the worst day is literally when me and my boss are clashing, where we aren't clicking, he's not understanding what I'm trying to get accomplished, and we just aren't meshing. And that doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it just pisses me off because I'm like, what the hell is wrong with him today, right? But for me, the best day is when I can then, after that bad day, go to the chairman of the board and get confirmation that I was right, and then go back to the CEO and let him know that I was right all along. So that's my worst and best right there.
How long were you at that company when that happened?
Exactly. I have a quarterly one-on-one for an hour with my chairman of the board.
Good.
So he and I have got a great relationship.
Anil, okay.
I think the tough days are, messaging. You guys may be coming from the same space, but not be able to convey the message in the right language or be able to get that point across. I think for me, I'm big on mentorship. One of my happiest days was just this past weekend. I was at the airport, ran to a friend of mine's, and she was on holiday from Europe, and she mentioned she just got promoted. And I'd brought her on as a staff analyst. So I'm proud to say that I've over my tenure of my career, produced 7 CISOs. She just took over Northern Command and NATO as the new deputy CISO. So that's a highlight. And when you have your team become leaders and win, that's a bonus for me.
Yep, I agree.
So, worst day is 1 week after taking a new job, finding out that your network was hit by ransomware. Not much worse than that. Best day, by far, is when the team just works. Everybody knows what everybody else is thinking. Everybody else helps everybody else. It is an all for one and one for all. It's not how do I make myself better, but how do we make us better? And there isn't a better day than that.
Yeah. So an online question, and I think we got another one here in the front row that has another question. Thoughts on potential SEC requirements for disclosing cyber experience within the board?
I already disclose it. There is no difference.
Well, I think the question is, what do we think of the SEC in starting to impose requirements for cyber experience to be on your board?
I think it's a good thing. I think that you should have that position on the board that understands tech, that understands more than just the business side of it, and truly that holds you accountable for it. Because you're there for the board, you're there for the company, and we can all BS our way through anything by throwing tech out. But you have that person on the board that understands what you're saying and saying that DNS and TLS mean nothing to each other, so let's try this again. And so it really holds you accountable for what you provide to the board to make sure that what the board is being told truly is what the board needs to be told and all the information that the board needs to be told. So I don't think it's a bad thing.
Yeah, so the biggest thing is the change in disclosure timetable, right? It's 4 days, and it's got to be material in nature, right? But you collectively, as leaders and representative organizations have to define, ensure what is material. Then the clock starts. So the rules go into effect in December. If you're SMB, you have 180 days after that. Beyond that, most organizations are already doing this or solving for it because they have to, because from a regulatory compliance standpoint, they have to adhere to GDPR already. So it's nothing that new. More importantly, SEC let firms off a little bit. They could have went harder. They actually pulled back the reins a little bit on what was actually finalized exactly. Because the intent was to define, ensure, and hold the reins to them. But now, like you talked about before, is the board has to have a lot more insight. What are you doing? What is your risk management strategy? You got to be able to convey that on a recurring basis.
So I'll say that the thing you said, the question, Dave, actually they didn't requirement, and what they released, they aren't requiring it. They're still talking about it.
The question was potential. They're potentially thinking about requirements.
The reality is this. Most boards fail because they don't ask the right questions. Period. Right? They ask, that thing in the news, will that happen to us? Well, that's not the right damn question. Right? Like, what is the likelihood of that happening to us? There's no context. So I think the big importance of that potentially happening is somebody at the board finally asking security leaders the right question that the security leaders can then prepare for that, right? Because this whole aspect of material and all, asking the right question from the board and getting that question will help prepare security leaders to be better. Because right now we got a real issue at the CISO level because there's not enough really skilled and qualified CISOs that understand how to do that.
So I have laryngitis. So I'm not going to talk very loud. But my question actually piggybacks on the one that came in online, so thank you to whoever is reading my thoughts in cyberspace. So they also put out a strategy requirement with the latest drafts, stating that companies would actually have to disclose their security strategy requirements and attest to it. Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, so that's a very slippery slope because now we start getting into certain, IP type things of how much do I share that then puts me at more risk, right? So I don't think that that'll go through just because of the fact that there's going to be so much pushback on that. Like, we have to have NDAs with companies just to talk about some basic things, just to even know what tool sets they use. So when you start talking about your strategy, even a strategy at a high level is going to give any threat actor a lot of visibility into what they're not going to do or what areas to punch harder at. So I don't think that's going to really come to fruition. I think, to Anil's point, what they did early on where they said some things to kind of scare everybody straight, this is like scared straight. Sending kids to prison, but you're not really going to put them in prison, right? I think that's what they're doing.
Yeah, in the same vein, right? It's means and methods. How you do business may provide competitive advantage to your competitor, right? Of what they're doing. Like, maybe we should do that, maybe we don't. So it is double-edged sword. It is slippery slope. And part of that, too, is, again, you want to be able to convey that you're doing security. But strategies, how you go about making that hot dog, nobody really needs to know. So there's going to be pushback again. A lot of us provide comments to SEC on what made sense collectively.
All right, thank you. And we're just about out of time, so we'll be starting to turn this back over to you guys. But first,
Awesome.
I got this one real quick suggestion.
I'm going to have one last question.
Okay.
And it's all for the vendors in this room who have stayed, okay? Even though we said to stay the whole time. But I want to ask the panel, on behalf of the vendors, what you can suggest on how they best get in front of you.
That's exactly what I was getting ready to suggest. It was like I was going to speak to all the vendors in the room and say, hey, for next year, why don't you go to her and recommend that we have either a panel or a session on how the best approach for you all to reach us. Because that's something we struggle with all the time. The types of emails that come in, I'm telling you, some of the emails that come in to approach us, we throwing you in the trash and we're not ever talking to you guys. I mean, it's that, sometimes it's that bad. And I think it's for us to talk with you all to let you know what those things are that we don't want to see, and then what the best way is for you to reach us. Because I know you all probably struggle with that too. How can I reach them? I know I want to reach them, but what's the best approach? So I think that's a great one. Yeah.
Do not send me a meeting invite blindly.
Yeah.
That never works. What that does do is it allows me to go and blacklist you so I don't have to hear from you again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Look, I think Larry talked about before, you've got to establish relationships. We act as trusted advisors internally, but we also talk about trusted partners. We want to work with the vendors, but you've got to be able to engage with us collectively. And more importantly, we talk. If you burn one of us, the rest of us will find out.
But Anil, how do they get that relationship with you? Because they're sending you the meeting invite to start that relationship.
We don't want a meeting invite.
I know. Yeah. Just tell us how.
Yeah.
That's a separate talk.
I'll real quick. I know I'm not part of the panel, but I'm going to jump in there too because I'm thinking about writing a book of the emails that I've received that just unbelievable sometimes. And the one I can really point out more recently was I was repeatedly emailed, and if you understand, number one, that I counted up this past year how many average emails I get a day for a vendor solicitation. And on my average, it's about 300 a day. Yep. I can't go through all that email. But I will notice the ones that are repeat. And the ones that are repeating, I'm not saying that's what I want.
Right.
Because the ones that I'm repeating, I'm going through and reading through there, and the first one will say, you know, I'm so-and-so with so-and-so, and we got this product I'd like to introduce to you, right? 3 days later, I get, well, I haven't heard from you. I don't know how to get in touch with you. Can you at least reply to my email? And I'm still like, that's still embedded in 300 more emails. And then another couple of days go by, and I finally get to, okay, I'm assuming you have no interest in this, so therefore I'm going to drop you off of my list, but if you'd like to continue, please let me know. And then the fourth one came in and said, the final fourth one was, well, I guess you really don't care about the threats in the world. I'm like, no. You will never get my audience if you're going to talk to me back like that one.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. I guess you don't care about security of your company.
Yeah.
I would say the biggest thing is do your homework. Don't use that automated messaging queue and insert name and fire, right? So at least do the homework. What businesses are you in? What technologies have you in? What press releases are out there about us? Do the basics that you would go do in a job interview. At least that much. Know what spaces we play in. And that's how you, again, get past that. But don't do the calendar invites. Don't blow up people's email boxes. I mean, again, there's a way to engage, and there's a way not to.
One last one. Don't name drop. Don't tell me you're reaching me out because my CEO asked you to.
Oh, God.
That one doesn't work. I know my CEO didn't ask you to contact me. Okay?
Candace.
Simple.
No, I would agree with what he just said about knowing who you're talking to, because I'm the non-CISO on the panel, and I get requests for software and tools. I'm like, I'm not even the person to make the decision, so is it really me that you should have reached out to? So just knowing that is helpful, because I get spammed and I should not. So you're wasting your credits on LinkedIn sending me things. So just know who you're reaching out to.
So I actually do sales training for companies, right? And I do it because it pissed me off about 15 years ago. And so I had to create something to help people. Here's the reality. Relationships matter, number one. But you can't, if you think about it and how you made a friend in school, you didn't just go up and spam them every day until they became your damn friend. That wasn't what you did, right? You were genuine. You were honest. You got to know something about them. Oh, you play basketball. I like basketball too. Oh, I'm playing with you on the tetherball court, right? You knew something about them. So what I tell everyone who is trying to figure out how to connect with an executive that they want to do business with, get to know them. There are so many ways to get to know them. Go on LinkedIn. You can read every one of our LinkedIn profiles and see every post that we've commented on, everything that we've sent out, all of the stuff to get to know a little bit about who we are. Right? Once you get to know a little bit about who someone is, then you can connect with them more deeply on a different level versus just, hey, I got a tech I want to sell you. Because that's going to be the lasting relationship. One of my best friends I met because he was assigned to be my handler as a junior salesperson. I would fly out. The CEO was a good friend of mine of this big tech company. He would fly me out when the Spurs were in town to play the Phoenix Suns. And this guy was basically my handler. Every time I came into town, he got assigned to me, and we were drinking, and we were having a ball. And now I ended up being at his wedding 8 years ago. He came to my 50th birthday party last year. He came and hung out like he's one of my best friends. But he built a relationship with me. So for the 7 or 8 sales roles he's had at different companies, guess what? He knows he can call me directly. He can pick up the phone, and we are going to be able to have a conversation. If it's a fit, we'll do something. If it's not, we won't. But I'll be honest with him, right? It's got to be that level. But I'll give you an example of the opposite. I run a not-for-profit. I'm a CISO for this company. I'm on the board or an advisor to multiple companies. You know, I will get an email from someone talking about a company I no longer work for or trying to sell me something for a not-for-profit that doesn't do business in cyber. Like, what are you doing? Like, did you even look? Like, you didn't even try. So it's literally, if you just give a little bit of effort, just a little bit of effort, then you can honestly reach us. It's not that hard.
That's great. And since I'm just watching Suits, I would get 2 tickets to the Knicks game and send it to him. Because that's what Harvey Specter does.
Yes, you could do that. That would work.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dave, and the panel. Everybody give a round of applause. This was awesome. Very good. All right. We are going to just get a couple minutes set up, and we're going to start giving away the prizes, okay? We're going to be doing the pulling from the